It was the summer of 2003. Beyoncé had just released her debut single album. The world was still on dial-up. Remember when your computers would scream at you? And Britney and Justin just announced their breakup. It was a confusing digital world for a 12-year-old girl to navigate. And that summer, I had been preparing for my first day of middle school. Middle school, a ravenous jungle of teenage hormones and extreme body odor. So when I reached those double doors, I was greeted by a sea of Abercrombie and Fitch bad highlights and kids playing on their fancy Nokia phones. And me, a brace-faced, Care Bear collecting, Harry Potter obsessed, 5'0", 100-pound tropical fish that I was, because I was one of the only Puerto Rican kids in my school and one of the only bilingual kids too. Fitting in was never going to be my category. I knew I was never going to be one of the cool kids. So I went home that day, and I remember laying in my bed, feeling just a little defeated. And before social media, before documenting every single aspect of your life, preteens, we would just sit there in our beds having existential crises, watching the ceiling fan go round and round and round. And then I had an idea, the greatest idea. I was gonna go through my mom's stuff. That always proved to have exciting results. And my mom, she worked a whole bunch. She was a single mom. So I was always cared by my great-grandparents, who were wonderful people, didn't speak a lick of English, but they were from a simpler time, the old country in Puerto Rico. And you see, my great-grandmother, she kept everything from our family history, from 1940s onwards. I mean, it was an adventure every time I opened up her dusty drawers. And that afternoon, I found a photo album of Polaroids, grainy photos, showcasing Aquanet hairspray, Lycra, windbreakers, a world of neon and pastel colors of a not-so-distant world, the 80s. And it looked like such a fun time, and my mom looked like a cool kid. And so I was looking through her closet, and something caught my eye. It was a jean jacket, and so I pulled it from the back of the closet. It had iron-on patches and Sharpie doodles all over. It was my mom's, and so I put it on, and it was super, super big. I remember the sleeves hung over my hands, and I assumed my teenage form like my mom had once did. And so I found a shoebox of old cassettes. And as I was looking through them, Wham, okay, Bon Jovi. And then I found a black little cassette tape with the words, "Appetite for Destruction." Now, I was a 12-year-old girl, but on the inside, I felt like I was a tiger. And so these next 3 years in middle school was defined by a journey of making who I felt on the outside appear, or on the inside appear on the outside. Yes. And so I ran to my room, and I put that cassette in my stereo. And yes, my stereo still had a cassette compartment then. And that is when it happened to me. And that is when the howl of Axl Rose filled my room. Oh my God! And then, bum, 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 bum. Nena, tú estás loca. Baja esa música. Translation, girl, have you lost your mind? 'Cause I help you find it. And I'm sure I lost my mind a little bit that day. I bet there were literal stars in my eyes, and I needed to know everything. I needed to know everything behind this sound. So that's when I did my research. Did you guys know that William Bruce Bailey, Axl Rose, He was born in Indiana, and he hitchhiked all the way from Indiana to Los Angeles, California, and he was beaten, assaulted, mugged, everything, but he never stopped because he knew that something was waiting for him in LA. And Saul Hudson, that's Slash, he grew up in Great Britain, and he lived with his grandparents. I love my grandparents. And he found a acoustic guitar with just one string by looking through his grandma's stuff in her attic. I love going through my grandma's stuff. I was just like these people. So a misfit, ragtag band of bandanas and snakeskin boots made their scene in this musical world filled with Madonna and Cher. Came Guns N' Roses, and they were my favorite band. So throughout my 6th grade year, my Care Bear and Britney Spears posters slowly came down, and up went Guns N' Roses. Now, by the time I was in 7th grade, things were a little better. It was good to be in the middle. And I had found my home with the middle school band. I played trumpet. I also sang in the vocal chamber. And I kind of found my personality there by singing a whole bunch of rock songs and also things from the 80s. And through Guns N' Roses, I found other great musical influences that inspired me to want to perform and make art myself, like Queen, Aerosmith, Cher. I mean, if I could just turn back time and just be part of the 80s, yes, and experience all of these for the first time, it would have just been magical. But thus, I was still a tropical fish stuck in a Georgia country pond, just trying to find herself. So 8th grade rolls around. My dirty Converse kind of knew their way through these smelly hallways. That jean jacket fit just a little bit better, and I was on top. I was the tiger. But something felt a little lonely being at the top. You see, I had made some friends, but in middle school, when you're trying to find yourself, a lot of those friends found new pathways and new likes and dislikes, new avenues, and sometimes those changes were not for the better. So I felt myself at a crossroad. And you see, I was one of those kids that never really had to pay attention in school to make really good grades. I basically had daydreamed my way from 6th to 8th grade until I had Mr. Hewitt. Mr. Hewitt, we would call Fuddy-Duddy Dudley Do-Right. He was my 8th grade earth science teacher. He loved the environment, and he loved his cats. And he rode his bike to school every day because it was good for the environment. So me and Mr. Hewitt, we had a rough start. The thing is, he saw straight through me. Every single test I took, I failed. Every single essay I wrote, he sent back for more details. And so it kind of frustrated me. But, parent-teacher conference time that season came around, and progress reports came out, and I was failing. I had never failed a class before, and I didn't know how to explain this to my family, so I didn't. So here's the thing about teenagers. They think that they are smart, and so that was the case for me. I decided to forge my grandpa's signature on my progress report and turn it in the next day. And when I came home that afternoon, my mom was calling me from work. This never happens. I wonder what's going on. And so the conversation went a little bit like this. Laura Lynette. And that's when I knew the jig was up. Who is Brian Hewitt? My science teacher? Okay, well, do you want to explain to me why you have a 30 in earth science? Earth is the only planet we live on, child. And do you want to tell me who signed that progress report? Because I know it wasn't Bobby. Okay. So I was exposed for the middle school fraud that I was. And so Mr. Hewitt and my mom decided that my punishment was to clean up his classroom every single afternoon, every single break time, basically until I learned my lesson, which was basically the whole semester. No band practice for me. But one afternoon, Mr. Hewitt threw a Motley Crue t-shirt so I could wipe up the lab desks. And I looked at it and said, "Mr. Hewitt, Guns N' Roses is far superior to Motley Crue." And he said, "Well, of course, that's why I use that shirt as a rag." And so he said, "You know, we're not that different, you and I." And I was like, "Oh, really?" And so he went to his desk and pulled out a grainy Polaroid from a not-so-distant neon past. And there was a teenage Brian Hewitt with long hair. He had earrings and wearing a Guns N' Roses t-shirt. And he told me, "You know, I used to be in the middle school band. I played trombone. I also had my own rock band." "Oh, really, Mr. Hewitt?" "Yeah, I played the bass guitar." And so we got to talking about music and all this great stuff. And then we got to, you know, Guns N' Roses didn't become one of the greatest bands in the world just by, you know, slacking off and daydreaming. They really had to work hard. Even though they have that appearance where they don't care, they really do care. And they really do work at their craft. So you have a choice here too. Science isn't going to probably be the thing that you do for the rest of your life. But with everything that you do, you should do your best and be your best self. And that's how you learn who you are. And so when I was crafting this story, I thought it was a story about how my love for Guns N' Roses changed my life. But really, I discovered it was a story about how I learned to love and accept myself. Thank you.